We stand with the people of Israel in this barbarous attack, but we are tremendously concerned about the incitement and want to speak out very strongly against all the incitement which only contributes to these type of barbaric terrorist attacks.
That's the Foreign Affairs Minister John Baird reacting today to the brutal attacks on a Jerusalem synagogue that has killed at least 4 rabbis and injured 8 other worshippers, including Howie Chaim Rothman. That's a Canadian Israeli. It all went down during morning prayers. The attackers, Palestinian cousins from East Jerusalem, they were shot dead by police. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed tough retaliation and has already ordered the destruction of the killers' homes. He also blamed the Palestinian Authority for, his word, inciting violence, even though the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has condemned the attacks. Where does Canada stand on the conflict, and what should be done now to diffuse the violence there? Joining me now in the foyer of the House of Commons, James Bezan, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence. Paul Dewar is the NDP's Foreign Affairs critic, and Mark Garneau is a Liberal Foreign Affairs critic. Gents, thanks for being here. Mr. Bezan, both John Kerry and Benjamin Netanyahu blamed Mahmoud Abbas for, quote, inciting the violence in the weeks leading up to today's deadly attack, even though Abbas has openly condemned the attacks today. What's your view on that?
Well, I think all of us are appalled that people would be attacked while they are sitting peacefully worshiping. And it doesn't matter if it's in their synagogue or a church or a mosque. It's deplorable and brutal. And as Minister Baird said today, we don't want to see any further incitement from anyone. And so we are calling upon the Palestinian Authority to take the heat out, to drop the rhetoric. And even though they're condemning this attack, as you pointed out, they have been inciting more attacks against Israel. And we have to find a peaceful solution.
Who's inciting? This is important. Abbas, with Fatah, has condemned these attacks.
Condemned the attack, but you know what we're seeing, is this escalation in tensions around Jerusalem that haven't been condemned up until now. And I think that all authorities, not just Israel, but the Palestinian Authority and all international players here have to stand united against this terrorism, against this violence, and find a peaceful resolution to the problems that exist in Jerusalem right now. And this attack, it did take place in West Jerusalem, which is kind of outside of where we usually see these conflicts.
All right, let me get reaction from everyone, and we'll go back to the complexities around these things. Paul Dewar, what's your view on, again, John Kerry? Let me just play you this clip just so people appreciate. Here's what John Kerry said about that. He pointed the finger squarely at the Palestinian government, Fatah's government, their responsibility. Listen to this.
The Palestinian leadership must condemn this, and they must begin to take serious steps to restrain any kind of incitement that comes from their language, from other people's language, and exhibit the kind of leadership that is necessary to put this region on a different path.
Now look, the Palestinian presidency has condemned the killing of civilians on either side and condemns today's killing of worshippers at a synagogue in West Jerusalem. That is what Mr. Abbas's office have said, and yet the Americans and the Israelis have blamed him for inciting violence. What's your view?
Well, look, first of all, I think this is a horrific incident, and we all, I think, unanimously condemn it. But what we need to look at, Evan, is how we do it was interesting. I don't know if you caught this, but at the Knesset, the head of Israeli security briefed and was very public about everyone, and he was including politicians, to turn down the rhetoric, to calm things down, because what we've seen is an escalation actually since last spring, where there was killing of Palestinians, and we saw the kidnappings, we know that whole trajectory. So I think what's important here, I think from a Canadian perspective, is that we note that Mr. Abbas had condemned it. I think everyone has to play a leadership role here and just calming things down. The incident that happened today and what we've seen the last couple of weeks is very disturbing, because we're now talking about conflict in areas which were usually or often no-go zones, and we're talking about places of worship. And the last thing we want to see is this, escalate into something that's even more potent than it's already been, about land claims, etc., and into something that is based on religion. And so I think everyone has a role to play here to calm things down. I'm glad that President Abbas condemned it, and I support him in his comments.
All right, Mr. Garneau, we haven't explained this totally. I mean, a lot of this violence right now, then there's lots of fears this could lead to a third intifada. As you know, has to do with access to what the Jewish people call the Temple Mount, the Muslim people call the Noble Sanctuary. Obviously, since 1967, it came under Israeli authority, but it's Muslims, Jews, Christians, people have access to that location. What's your view of what's happening?
Well, actually, it is Jordan that is responsible for the administration of the Temple Mount, has been since 1967 and before. So, first of all, I also, our party, my leader, came out and condemned what happened today, this brutal violence, cowardly violence, killing innocent worshippers in the synagogue. This is really something that is following on events that have occurred in the past 3 or 4 weeks in East Jerusalem and on the Temple Mount at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And there has been a sort of a ramping up of temperature. And what is critical at this point is to bring that temperature down, and hopefully
how do you do that?
both sides.
I mean, I get that, but on the Palestinian
it's about
side,
leadership.
They say there's provocation on the Israeli side with new settlements. On the Israeli side, they say that there's propaganda over access to what they call the Temple Mount or the Noble Sanctuary. I mean, each side has a narrative that condemns the other.
Yeah, it's the old he said, she said. But at this point, it is a question of, as it has been for years, a question of the people in the positions of leadership, helped along with people like John Kerry and others who are sort of trying to help and mediate, to bring the two together and to try to bring that temperature down and start that dialogue that has started on many occasions in the past.
But to be fair, I just want to ask you, Mr. Garneau and Mr. Dewar, it was interesting, I noted today that John Kerry, and he doesn't do this usually, it was not just a condemnation of the attacks and we got to calm the temperature down. He actively pointed the finger today at Mahmoud Abbas, saying that the rhetoric and the violence in leading up to this, the days of rage, as it were, he said, he used the word incited this violence, and he pointed the finger at Mahmoud Abbas despite Abbas's condemnation of the violence. Would you do the same thing?
From what I have seen and read, and I've been looking at this all day long, there has been some incitement. Yes, there has been on the Palestinian side. Some of the things that I have read, more than just sort of approval of some of the things that we're talking about that have occurred in the past 3 or 4 weeks. So that doesn't help the situation, unfortunately, and this is where leadership is so critical on both sides.
Mr. Dewar, would you concur with that?
Yeah, well, the thing that was interesting about Mr. Kerry's comments, as we just heard, he was going, he was saying to the Palestinian leadership, and I think I don't know what his, frankly, to be really honest with you, I'm not sure what his intent was there. Perhaps it's to say, you have a role to play here to the Palestinian side, and to say, look, this is something that we have to speak out on, and if there's anyone who's inciting here, getting people to take these kinds of horrible actions, that we need to condemn it. So I'm trying to hold on to what Mr. Abbas said and say, okay, let's encourage that because that's what we want to see. But, Mr. Kerry was, I think, when he said, he didn't, the clip you played, it was about the Palestinian leadership, and he's trying to say, look, we need to ensure that people are going to condemn these kinds of things when they happen. And by the way, that requires when horrible things happen on the other side too. So I can only guess that's what he was trying to do.
I got about 30 seconds. I just want to get any details I can. Mr. Bezan, news today of another Canadian airstrike on the ISIS facility in northern Iraq. Yesterday, 4 CF-18s dropped 8 500-pound bombs in a warehouse where ISIS is believed to have been making IEDs. That's 3 strikes in 17 days of sorties. First of all, can you give us any details? And I guess if this is a significant enough contribution to damage ISIS in the wake of that absolutely horrific video where they don't seem to be backing down at all, as they showed those brutal beheadings of so many people.
Yeah, so I'm very proud of all members of the Canadian Armed Forces who are participating in Operation Impact, and the pilots that flew with the sorties today, or yesterday I should say, along with the Polaris aircraft that delivered over 28,000 pounds of fuel to CF-18 fighter jets, along with coalition partners, as we targeted this warehouse outside of Mosul. It was being used for training as well as for the making of improvised explosive devices. So this is a significant hit. It's one that, again, working in close collaboration with all coalition partners, including those on the ground, such as the Iraqi security forces and the Kurdish Peshmerga, were able to gather that intelligence and really degrade the capabilities of ISIL of doing more damage in the region, whether it's to innocent civilian or to our coalition partners.
But does it make a difference? Again, I'm not trying to diminish what it was, but you know, we're getting fed information every day about we've done a lot to degrade and diminish, but we have no way of measuring the strength of ISIS. We're not on the ground. There's no Canadian forces on the ground there. How are Canadians going to measure if this is effective? You know, everyone goes back to those old press conferences from the Vietnam War where they got body counts and but in the end that was meaningless. I'm not saying this is, but how are we to measure the efficacy here?
And you know, we've said that, you know, we're going to review this in 6 months. We only have a 6-month term here through parliamentary process approval on the motion that was passed a few weeks ago. And I think that we have to keep remember here that we are working in a large coalition. It's not based upon every bomb dropped and every strike that we hit. You got to remember that sometimes CF-18s are the wingman. They're painting the target. They're not necessarily the ones dropping the bomb, and also they're flying surveillance themselves. And so in the time that they've been there, they have been collecting more intelligence and getting the lay of the land. And you're going to see, you know, definitely, as was mentioned, ISIL has gone underground. It's harder to detect what they're doing, but through proper intelligence, like this warehouse, we have taken away a huge capability for them that they're using to terrorize the nation.
Unfortunately, there's lots more to discuss. I'm out of time here. James Bezan, Paul Dewar, and Mark Garneau. I appreciate your time. All three of you gentlemen, as you always do, come on and share your thoughts on this stuff. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.